When I received this message, I realized that everything I knew about my life was a lie. It was fun, I'm home, love you. Two short sentences, light, innocent, but I already knew that this was a lie. I held the phone in my hands and looked at the screen. There is a glass of whiskey on the table nearby. There is silence in my head. I knew she was not at home. I knew her fun wasn't limited to cocktails with her friends. My whole world shrank to one picture. The camera on the pier recorded her leaving with Nick. The time is 3:03 a.m. Not with friends, not home, just him and her. 7 years of stability, habits. The same thing every morning, every evening. I tried to change something. I held her hand longer than necessary, hoping she would squeeze mine back. I gave gifts for no reason, little surprises that once made her laugh and hug me tighter. One day I bought silk lingerie, which, it seemed to me, should awaken in her the passion that once lived in us. She unwrapped the package, ran her fingers over the fabric, but only smiled. Beautiful, Jack. Thank you. That's all. No play in the eyes, no flirtatious look, no desire to try it on right away. She put the box away in her closet as if it were just another useless souvenir. I didn't give up. Tried again and again. One day, when she was washing the dishes, I came up from behind, hugged her, and slowly kissed her on the neck, like once upon a time when we couldn't tear ourselves away from each other. Jack, her voice was soft, but distant. She gently released my fingers and turned to face me. I'm tired, she added, and kissed me on the cheek, as if it was a gesture of gratitude rather than desire. I stood in the darkened kitchen, watching her go into the bedroom. To the very bedroom where we once loved each other so much that we were suffocating with passion. Now she simply turned off the night light and fell asleep as soon as she touched the pillow. I tried to revive our intimacy. He suggested role-playing games, started talking about fantasies, and jokingly tried to encourage her to experiment. Oh, Jack, she laughed, but there was no anticipation in that laugh. This is not all about us. What about us? I asked. She shook her head thoughtfully, as if trying to find an answer. I tried giving her a massage before bed, running my fingers along her back, warming her skin with touches. Sometimes she responded by snuggling a little closer to me, but more often than not she simply fell asleep without waiting to continue. Was this a sign that she didn't want me anymore? Or did she just get so used to me that she forgot what it was like to burn at just one glance? I even suggested going to the ocean for the weekend. In my head, I pictured the scene. The sea air, the sound of the waves, her body illuminated by the moonlight, our fingers intertwined in the sheets. But she just smiled and kissed him on the cheek. Thank you, darling. We're doing well. Fine. No, not good. We became like neighbors. Kind, polite, but strangers. Every evening I lay down next to her and remembered those times when one touch was enough for everything to flare up. Now she turned her back to me, pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. Eli, we need to shake ourselves up. Let's try something. At least something. She waved it off. Jack, we have a wonderful life. Why do you need these changes? But it wasn't a matter of change. I didn't want something new. I wanted to give back what we already had. From time to time, I looked through old photographs. She and I are on a picnic. We laugh. We can't tear ourselves away from each other. We're in a hotel room in New York, drunk on champagne and desire. We're on the beach, wet, hugging in the rain. Where is all this now? I still loved her, still wanted her. But she seemed to be slipping away, and I didn't know how to get her back. I didn't notice this right away. At first, it was little things. She started getting up earlier, staying longer in the bathroom, going to the gym while I was still finishing my coffee. When she returned, she looked fresh and radiant. The eyes sparkled, there was a slight blush on the face. She began to pay more attention to her diet and read articles about a healthy lifestyle. From time to time, she mentioned a new trainer and new exercises, as if she was looking for something more in this than just sports. Great workout. I asked one day, watching her look at her phone with a smile. Yes, killer. She put a bottle of water on the table, ran her fingers across the screen, and quickly blocked it. You always said that sport is the key to health. I nodded. She really started to look amazing. More clearly defined cheekbones, toned arms, an easy gait. The clothes became more and more tight-fitting. I couldn't help but notice the admiring glances of men when we went out together, and the way she caught them. And then I saw the correspondence. Quite by accident, her phone vibrated while she was washing her hands in the kitchen. I glanced at the screen. "N, I can't wait for the next training session. You are great." The screen went dark. I winced. It flashed through my head. Who is N? Trainer? Friend? An ordinary acquaintance? Maybe this is just a joke? After all, I'm not a jealous husband. We trust each other. Eliza came back, grabbed the phone, looked at me and grinned. Did something happen? She asked, but there was a slight playfulness in her voice. No, just thinking. I decided not to give it any importance, but the thoughts did not go away. They returned when I saw how she was typing messages again, how she was smiling at the screen, how she was in a hurry to answer. That evening she said that she would stay late with her friends. We haven't seen each other for a long time, so we decided to go to a bar. Do you mind? Of course not. Have fun. I kissed her temple. She smelled of something sweet and new. Don't wait for me. Maybe I'll be back late. She left, and I was left at home alone with a glass of whiskey. The hours passed slowly. The time was approaching midnight, then 2, then 4. I watched TV, then just sat in the dark. I checked my phone, but there were no messages. At some point, I sat on the bed, listening to the silence. I tried to sleep, but only heard the sound of the door opening in the morning. Eliza entered, took off her shoes, and quietly slipped into the bedroom. I looked at her through half-closed eyelids. Did you have a good time? The voice was hoarse from lack of sleep. She shuddered slightly, not expecting that I was awake. Yes, very fun. We chatted, drank cocktails. Time flew by. Who was it? Is everyone here? Marissa, Tiffany. Yes, sure. All. I nodded slowly, studying her face. Her eyes were shining, her lips were slightly swollen, her hair was slightly disheveled. She behaved confidently, but I noticed a delay in her answers, pauses of seconds. I'm glad for you, I said, turning away. In the darkness, her silhouette froze, as if waiting for something. And then there was a quiet exhalation. Sleep, Jack. I didn't answer. Too many questions were born in my head. But there were no answers yet. I felt that something was changing. I just didn't know which way yet. Marissa appeared unexpectedly, as always. I heard the click of heels in the corridor, then a loud bell. The door opened and a whirlwind burst into the living room, a 32 smile, a bright dress, sunglasses on top of her head. In his hand is an expensive bag that smells of leather and perfume. She threw it onto a chair and clapped her hands. You won't believe it, she announced from the threshold, waving her arms. I have a big idea. Eliza put the phone down, her eyes sparkling. I sighed, drinking the rest of my coffee. Marissa's visits rarely meant anything simple or ordinary. Marissa, you're like a hurricane, I grinned. What's this time? Party. She spread her arms, as if embracing an imaginary crowd. Not just a party, but the most luxurious night of this summer, on a yacht on Lake Travis. Only the best people, music, champagne, magnificent views of the city. And of course, you both have to be there. Eliza leaned forward. Wow, that sounds amazing. When? This weekend. Marissa sat down on the sofa, crossing her legs. Grant Williams has a luxury yacht. He has long wanted to do something grand. I'm taking control. The girls have already agreed. Nick, Damon, everyone will be there. It will be amazing. I frowned, putting my cup down. Marissa, this is clearly not just a friendly dinner. She rolled her eyes and sat down next to Eliza, taking her hand. Jack, what kind of skepticism is this? You're too serious. Relax. It's just fun, fresh air, beautiful people. A little dancing and cocktails. You both need to unplug from your routine sometimes. Eliza looked at me, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Jack, why not? She said, touching my hand. This will be fun. we haven't gone anywhere together for a long time. Because I don't like the idea of hanging out on a yacht with a bunch of people I barely know, I muttered, looking into my cup. Marissa chuckled. Darling, that's why you need to go, to shake things up, break away from routine. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I swear this night will be a reset for everyone. You can't even imagine how easy it is to breathe after such evenings. I felt an alarm bell go off inside me. Something in her tone, in this hint. Eliza ran her finger along the edge of the glass of water. Jack, don't be a bore, she said softly. If you don't like it, we'll leave earlier, I promise. It's just one night. I looked at her, then at Marissa. Their looks were full of anticipation. I felt like I was trapped. Okay, I said slowly. I will think. Marissa smiled contentedly, clapped her hands, and took out her phone. Great. I'll take care of the organization and send you all the details. This will be the best night of this summer. She winked at Eliza, and I still wasn't sure I liked this plan. Something inside me told me it's better to refuse this trip. The week passed slowly. Something in Eliza's behavior changed. She became more distant, often sat on the phone, answering in monosyllables when I asked who she was texting with. Usually, we easily discussed the little things of the day and shared our thoughts. Now it seemed that she was withdrawing more and more into herself. I tried not to dwell on it, but the uneasy feeling did not go away. And then this happened. I was just walking down the hallway when I tripped over a damn dumbbell that I forgot to put away. I felt a sharp pain in my ankle and instantly collapsed on the floor. The pain was piercing, throbbing. Crap. I grabbed my leg, gritting my teeth. Eliza came running a few seconds later. Jack, are you okay? I groaned, trying to get up, but as soon as I stepped on my foot, it seemed to refuse to support my weight. The face was distorted by a grimace of pain. No, it's not okay, I breathed. I think it's something with the ligaments. Eliza helped me to the sofa, her face expressing genuine concern. About 10 minutes later, I already had ice on my leg, and my leg itself was swelling right before my eyes. You need to go to the hospital, she said, sitting down next to him. Come on, I'll call a taxi. 20 minutes later, we were already in the emergency department. I sat in the chair, trying not to move my leg, and Eliza walked back and forth, nervously clutching the phone. The doctor appeared quite quickly, an elderly man with a tired face but attentive eyes. After examining his leg, he nodded. Looks like a bad sprain. We'll take an X-ray, but I don't think there's a fracture. Half an hour later, the results confirmed his words. The doctor applied a tight bandage and sternly warned. At least 2 weeks without load. Walk on crutches, keep your leg above the level of your heart, apply ice. Do not heat or rub the injury site under any circumstances, and do not train or work through pain. Try not to overload the joint and rest. I chuckled, and Eliza just exhaled quietly, stroking my shoulder. She looked tense, as if she was thinking about something. The party on the yacht now definitely took place without me. So you can't go? Eliza asked the next day, standing at the mirror and styling her hair. Obviously not. I looked with annoyance at my swollen leg. But you can go. I don't want you to cancel plans because of me. She stopped, looking at me in the mirror. You are sure? I nodded. Certainly. Have fun. She smiled, but not as much as before. There was no former lightness in her eyes. I tried not to attach any importance to it, but the feeling of anxiety only intensified. Before the trip, her friends, Marissa and Tiffany, came to see us. They sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee and chatting. Eliza briefly went into the bedroom, saying that she had forgotten the charger. I heard her closet creaking and her moving something, but soon silence filled the house, leaving me with the muffled voices of my friends in the kitchen. I limped slowly past, heading to the sink for a glass of water. The sound of the running water barely drowned out their conversation, but suddenly I caught a phrase that made me freeze in place without finishing the water. Do you think she's ready? Tiffany's voice sounded muffled, but in this silence it cut the ear especially clearly. Of course, Marissa answered with a slight chuckle. leaning back in her chair. Let's see how she behaves. I froze at the doorway, clutching a glass in my hand. What were they talking about? What did ready mean? What should Eliza be prepared for? Questions, one after another, flashed through my head, and slight anxiety settled in my chest. Eliza came up to me as I sat on the sofa with my legs stretched out on the pillow. The evening light fell softly on her face, but something in her eyes was different, maybe tension, maybe indecision. It was as if she was about to say something important, but didn't know where to start. Jack, I wanted to say, the party is scheduled for Friday. Her voice was light, almost careless, but a note of caution slipped into it. I looked up at her. Already? I could hardly suppress my irritation. We have not yet discussed how she will go, who will be there. So, in 2 days? Yes, she sat down next to him, crossing her legs and thoughtfully fiddling with the hem of her t-shirt. The girls and I decided to stay the night at the hotel after the party. Well, so as not to come back late. I nodded slowly, replaying her words in my head, trying not to show any doubt. At the hotel? Whose idea is this? Eliza shrugged her shoulders slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, as she always did when she was nervous. Marissa. She said it would be more convenient this way. We can relax without worrying about the road. I held my breath. Eliza and I never discussed spending the night in a hotel after parties. Usually, she always returned home, even late. I didn't like the idea, but I didn't want to seem like a controlling husband. And I thought that you would return home. I leaned forward, carefully peering into her face, trying to catch even the slightest glimmer of uncertainty. She chuckled nervously, but her fingers clasped in her lap trembled slightly. Jack, really, you know how tired you get after such evenings. Plus cocktails, music. I just don't want to think about the road late at night. It will be safer. I nodded, but the feeling of strange anxiety did not go away. She avoided my gaze. It wasn't like her. Where is this hotel? In the city center. Just a small hotel, cozy, nothing special. This is the Blue Orchid. We have already booked a room for 3. Who exactly is we? I asked, casually but carefully watching her reaction. Me, Marissa, and Tiffany, of course, she answered with a slight smile, but there was something too hasty in her voice. I ran my hand over my face, trying to accept her words. Maybe I'm looking for hidden meaning in vain. She didn't do anything suspicious. At the end of the day, it's just a party, just a bachelorette party, just a vacation. Okay, I breathed. The main thing is that you feel comfortable. Eliza smiled and kissed me on the cheek. I felt her warm breath, but for some reason this gesture seemed feigned to me, as if she was trying to calm me down, but was not entirely sure that everything would go smoothly. Thank you, darling. I knew you would understand. I didn't answer. I just watched her get up from the couch and walk into the bedroom, taking a quick glance at her phone. Eliza. I stood on the deck, holding a glass of sparkling wine. Cold drops flowed down the glass, leaving wet marks on my fingers. The wind from Lake Travis felt pleasantly cool on the skin, mixing with a heat that came in waves after a couple of sips of champagne. The light smell of salt and wood spread everywhere, mixing with the aromas of expensive perfume and cigar smoke. Marissa and Tiffany laughed at the bar, throwing their heads back, while the music blared rhythmically from the speakers. I felt slightly dizzy, not only from the alcohol, but also from the atmosphere. This night felt like something special. Forbidden. It vibrated with electricity, filled with anticipation. Well, how did you like the party? Marissa's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned to her and smiled. Funny. Much better than I expected. She grinned and leaned closer, her eyes sparkling with excitement. And it's just the beginning. I turned my gaze to the guests. Everywhere laughter, noise, camera flashes. And men. There were a lot of men who looked at us, and maybe at me in particular. I felt it, especially Nick. I met his gaze. He sat at the bar, lounging on a high chair, and watched me, smiling faintly. When I caught his eye, he slowly raised his glass and took a sip without looking away. His self-confidence was challenging, causing excitement that I tried not to show. My fingers squeezed the stem of the glass a little tighter. I didn't know why he looked at me like that, or maybe she knew, but didn't want to admit it. "He's clearly interested in you," Tiffany whispered, appearing next to him. I shuddered. "Who?" I asked, pretending that I didn't understand. "Oh, come on," she snorted. "Nick. He literally can't take his eyes off you, and to be honest, it even turns me on." Marissa giggled, watching him from under her long eyelashes. "He likes you, Eliza, and I think it's mutual." I shook my head, trying to suppress my growing excitement. "You are exaggerating. He's just friendly." Tiffany rolled her eyes and took another sip of her cocktail. "Yeah, of course. Friendly. That's why he looks at you as if you are the only woman on this yacht." I laughed, but something sank inside. Somewhere off to the side, behind a scattering of flickering garlands, an impromptu card game broke out. The men, stretched out on sun loungers and sitting right on the wooden flooring of the terrace, animatedly threw cards to each other, accompanying each successful move with rolling laughter and clapping on the table. One of the players, unable to bear the tension, stood up, threw back his head and laughed loudly, causing the nearest company to turn curious glances towards him. At the same moment, someone's silhouette flashed at the edge of the pool. A splash, a fountain of splashes, and the roar of voices shot up. The water foamed, reflecting hundreds of tiny lights that, like stars scattered across the sky, sparkled in the dark surface. Shouts of delight were heard from all sides. Some applauded, some encouraged the others, daring them to jump after them. The party was rapidly gaining momentum. Its rhythm resembled a whirlwind in which it was impossible not to be drawn into it. I stood at the bar, feeling the light evening breeze touch my skin, but it could not cool down the heat flaring up inside. Was this playful tingling the result of champagne, light bubbles spreading in the blood, or was it because of other people's glances, gliding over me, appraising, attentive? It seemed that the invisible line between reality and something unknown was becoming thinner, ready to disappear at any moment. The party is just beginning. The music became louder, and with it my desire to simply disconnect from all the worries. Alcohol spread over the body in warm waves, making movements smooth and thoughts light, almost weightless. The air was saturated with the aromas of expensive perfume, mixed with notes of tobacco smoke and a cool lake breeze. "You're too tense, Eliza," Marissa purred, her voice enveloping her like warm summer wine. Her palms easily slid along my waist, and before I could say anything, she pushed me closer, so that I felt her aroma light, spicy, with notes of jasmine and something tart, exciting. "Relax, feel this moment. Isn't that what we're here for?" I smiled, mechanically, but there was still a spark of doubt smoldering inside. The evening was exciting, but at the same time it seemed to me something unsteady, as if the line between what was permitted and what was forbidden had become frighteningly blurred. However, is this bad? For once in so long, allow yourself a little freedom. Should we let the night decide where it will take us? "You think too much," Tiffany intervened, her laughter ringing in the air, ringing, light, like the wind rushing between the fluttering curtains on the terrace. She deftly grabbed my glass, and before I could object, she placed it on the nearest table. The reflections of the champagne flickered in the glass, but I no longer looked at it. My gaze involuntarily found Nico. He was still around, too close. In the twilight of the lights, his eyes looked darker, deeper, like shadowed pools into which it was easy to fall if you lingered for even a moment. His hand, warm, confident, slid along my back as if by accident, but I felt every touch, every millimeter of movement. It lingered a little longer than it should have, leaving behind a subtle, almost invisible tension, like a barely perceptible jolt of electricity. Something uncertain hung in the air. He smiled, but there was something more in his eyes, something predatory. Nick took another sip of whiskey and leaned closer. "You look great today." His voice was low, almost velvety, rolling in warm waves like champagne. "This light, this evening. Everything is perfect." I pursed my lips slightly, not knowing how to react. It seemed as if the whole world was narrowing down to this moment, to his hand, to his gaze, to the feeling of someone else's breath nearby. I knew I should pull away, take a step back, but my legs wouldn't move. "Let's dance," he suggested, holding out his hand. I looked back at Marissa, expecting her to stop me, but a sly smile touched her lips. "Dance is just a dance," she winked. "Or not." His fingers lightly touched my palm, and I felt goosebumps run through my skin. He led me to the center of the deck, where other couples were already dancing. The music changed to something slower and more sensual. His hand lay gently on my waist, the other took my palm, pressing it to his chest. I wanted to say something, but the words got stuck in my throat. Nick was close, too close. His breath touched my cheek, and the warmth of his body was felt even through the fabric of my light dress. "Do you see?" He leaned towards me. His lips were only a few centimeters away. Just a dance. But why then was my heart beating so fast? Marissa and Tiffany watched from afar, their gazes full of approval and mild curiosity. I no longer knew if this was right, but could one night change anything? I closed my eyes and let the music carry me further. Jack. I spent the evening at home, trying to occupy myself with at least something. I turned on the TV, but even my favorite shows seemed meaningless. My leg ached, but what bothered me most was the silence. Eliza didn't write or call, and I promised myself that I wouldn't bother. She said that she would just relax with her friends, but something didn't give me peace. I tried to read, but the words didn't stick in my head. I switched from channel to channel, but not a single film held my attention. The silence in the house was oppressive. I walked from room to room, checked my phone, sat down again, and mindlessly stared at the screen. The clock on the wall showed 2 in the morning. I took the phone and dialed her number. Horns. 1, 2, 3. No one answered. My heart sank. I tried again. Horns. Then silence. Maybe she just doesn't hear. Maybe the phone is in the bag and there is music around. But why didn't you call back earlier? Why didn't you at least write? Almost 15 minutes later, the phone vibrated. Eliza. "Hello?" Her voice was muffled, strange, as if she was trying to speak more quietly than usual. "Eliza, where are you?" I tried to make my voice calm, but inside everything shrank into a tight knot. "Jack, it's okay. She paused, and then spoke faster again. "We're already in the room, just chatting, drinking wine. Everything is fine." There was something wrong in her voice. He sounded tense, like she was hiding something. I opened my mouth to ask something else, but suddenly another voice, low, male, was heard in the speaker. "Baby, you don't need to go there. It's better to stay here." My breath froze. My throat is dry. "Eliza, who is this?" My voice sounded harsher than I expected. There was tense silence on the line for a second. Then I heard a slight chuckle and the sound of movement, as if someone was coming closer. "Jack, I have to go," she said hastily. "We'll talk later." Horns. She hung up the call. I spent the evening at home, trying to occupy myself with at least something. I turned on the TV, but even my favorite shows seemed meaningless. My leg ached, but what bothered me most was the silence. Eliza didn't write or call, and I promised myself that I wouldn't bother. She said that she would just relax with her friends, but something didn't give me peace. I tried to read, but the words didn't stick in my head. I switched from channel to channel, but not a single film held my attention. The silence in the house was oppressive. I walked from room to room, checked my phone, sat down again, and mindlessly stared at the screen. The clock on the wall showed 2 in the morning. I took the phone and dialed her number. Horns. 1, 2, 3. No one answered. My heart sank. I tried again. Horns. Then silence. Maybe she just doesn't hear. Maybe the phone is in the bag and there is music around. But why didn't you call back earlier? Why didn't you at least write? Almost 15 minutes later, the phone vibrated. Eliza. "Hello?" Her voice was muffled, strange, as if she was trying to speak more quietly than usual. "Eliza, where are you?" I tried to make my voice calm, but inside everything shrank into a tight knot. "Jack, it's okay. She paused, and then spoke faster again. "We're already in the room, just chatting, drinking wine. Everything is fine." There was something wrong in her voice. He sounded tense, like she was hiding something. I opened my mouth to ask something else, but suddenly another voice, low, male, was heard in the speaker. "Baby, you don't need to go there. It's better to stay here." My breath froze. My throat is dry. "Eliza, who is this?" My voice sounded harsher than I expected. There was tense silence on the line for a second. Then I heard a slight chuckle and the sound of movement, as if someone was coming closer. "Jack, I have to go," she said hastily. "We'll talk later." Horns. She hung up the call. I was left sitting in the dark, holding the phone in my hands. Blood was pounding in my temples, everything in my chest tightened. I stared into the void in front of me, trying to process what I had heard. Who was it? Why did she talk so strangely? Why did you drop the call? I tried to dial her number again. Autoresponder. He put down the phone and sighed, feeling his anger and anxiety growing. I forced myself to get up and walk around the room. I took a sip of water, but it didn't help. The feeling of anxiety did not go away. It seemed that the air became thicker, heavier. I went to the window and looked out at the empty street. The night was dark and moonless. Thousands of thoughts were spinning in my head. The feeling of powerlessness was eating away from the inside. I sat down again, staring at the phone, hoping it would vibrate, that she would text. But the screen remained dark. And the more time passed, the more I realized that something was wrong. I sat in the dark, looking at the phone. Thoughts gave me no rest. My heart was beating faster than it should have. Eliza hung up the call. There was something wrong in her voice. Male voice in the background. Who? I tried to call her again, but the answering machine answered. The fingers clenched tighter. My palms were sweating. Should I wait? Or... No, I couldn't just sit idly by. I took the laptop, turned it on, and quickly typed her name into the search. Social media. The last time I was online was a few hours ago. Her profile looked normal, but I knew she had private albums. And if there's something there that she doesn't want to show me. I opened the browser and launched the program to recover deleted data. Adrenaline thundered in my ears. I remembered her old password, the name of her first dog, and the year of birth. I tried it. Error. Crap. I tried again without result. He took a deep breath. Our wedding date. Ready. I entered. The first thing that caught my eye was the empty message history. Cleared. She never did that. Too suspicious. I opened a gallery. Photo. Some were deleted, but I knew how to restore them. A few minutes of waiting, and there they were, files that, in her opinion, no one else should have seen. First photo. Marissa smiling at the camera while holding a glass. An ordinary selfie. Second, there are 3 of them on deck. Alyssa, Marissa, Tiffany, city lights in the background. Drunken smiles, relaxed poses. And then, I felt my muscles tighten. The next photo was different. Eliza, she is dancing. But he doesn't just dance. Nick is in the back. His hands are on her waist. Her body is pressed against him, her head thrown back. Smile. Something like laughter, like excitement. I wasn't breathing. More to come. Video. My fingers trembled as I pressed play. "Hey, Eliza, give me another one." Morris's voice. The camera jerks, the sound of laughter. And again Nick, close, damn close. Eliza holds a glass, her cheeks glow, she looks into the camera and laughs. Suddenly he leans closer and whispers something in her ear. Her lips part, but no words are heard. Marissa laughs off screen and someone claps their hands. I could feel the heat slowly rising up my neck. His hands clutched the laptop until his knuckles turned white. I scrolled further. The next pictures are even closer. Nick and Eliza are in semi-darkness. The light of lanterns on the water illuminates their silhouettes. He holds her hand. The next shot is of her leaning towards him, her lips dangerously close. Crap. I looked at the phone, but didn't write anymore. Didn't call. I didn't want to hear another lie. Now I was just waiting. Outside the window, the night began to fade, turning into a dark blue dawn. My head is empty. The heart beat dully, as if its sound was echoing within the walls of an empty house. I didn't sleep a wink for a minute. 2:45. Silence. The only sound is the muffled ticking of a clock. I couldn't understand what I was waiting for. Maybe her messages, explanations, or confirmation of your worst guesses. 3:03. The phone vibrated. I picked it up, knowing who the message was from. It was fun, I'm home, love you. I looked at the words. They looked correct, ordinary. But the meaning behind them was empty, alien. At home? Was I supposed to believe it? I stood up slowly, feeling the tension in my body. Every movement was difficult. I went to the bathroom and washed my face, looking in the mirror. Eyes red, tired. The face is drawn. Coffee didn't help. The taste was bitter, but not invigorating. I replayed in my head the pictures I had seen at night, their movements, their views, her laughter. 8:30. I walked around the room, feeling the pressure growing inside. The feeling that I had to do something wouldn't go away. I picked up the phone but didn't call. No, I'll do it differently. 9:12. I couldn't stand it. I took the keys and left the house. The car started up the first time. My fingers gripped the steering wheel more tightly than necessary. I didn't know what I wanted to see, but I knew where I was going. Marissa. She was always at the center of these games. If anyone could know what happened that night, it would be her. The road to her house was familiar. The wind ruffled the leaves, the morning was fresh, but everything inside me was burning. The streets are deserted, the city has not yet woken up. I drove up and immediately saw her car. She was standing at the pier. My heart sank. I exhaled, but there was not enough air. I turned the car around and drove home. I heard the door open and footsteps echoing in the silence of the house. 11:02. Eliza appeared on the threshold. Her hair was slightly disheveled, but her face looked fresh, as if she had just woken up. She stopped, meeting my gaze, then smiled hesitantly, but trying to look relaxed. "Hello," her voice was light, as if nothing had happened. "You weren't sleeping." I was silent, just looking at her. Everything was boiling inside, but I controlled myself. I was waiting for an explanation. At least try. I wanted to hear how she would get out. She removed the bag from her shoulder, placed it by the door, and stretched, yawning. "God, I'm so tired. We fell asleep after the party, and only now we're able to get ready." She spoke too simply, too casually, as if she really believed in her words, or she pretended to. Her voice sounded even, but there was tension in her movements, too fast, too rehearsed. I was still silent. "Jack, what's wrong with you?" I leaned back on the sofa, clasping my fingers. Her eyes were running, but she quickly pulled herself together. I saw how she tried her best not to show nervousness, but the little things gave it away, the way her fingers trembled, the way she hastily tucked a lock of hair behind her ear. "Did you fall asleep?" I finally asked, carefully watching her reaction. "Yes. I drank a couple of cocktails and everything was somehow blurry. I only remember how we laughed. Then we ended up in the room and I just passed out." She sighed and ran her hand through her hair. "I swear, that's all." I nodded slowly, continuing to study her. She spoke confidently, but her eyes. There was something in them that was not there before. A hidden anxiety, as if she was testing whether I believed her. In the room, then, I took the phone from the table and twirled it in my hands. Did Marissa fall asleep right away, too? Eliza tensed slightly, but quickly pulled herself together. "Yes, sure. We were all exhausted." She smiled, but the smile came out. Silence hung between us. I studied her face. I wish I had her confidence. I wish I could believe it. But I heard this voice on the phone. "I've seen the photographs." And I knew she was lying. "Do you have anything to say?" I asked, slowly looking up at her. She bit her lip, hesitated for a moment, and then smiled tightly. "Jack, what are you talking about?" There was a slight laugh in her voice, but I knew her too well. She was nervous, and I felt it with every cell. I pretended that everything was fine, that I believed it, that her explanations satisfied me. But inside, I couldn't let go of the feeling that I was only hearing part of the story. I knew the truth was out there, and I was going to find it. I told Eliza that I had a meeting at work, and I went to the pier. Lake Travis was calm, the water shimmering in the sun. I got out of the car and looked around. There were still traces of last night's party. Here, a couple of empty glasses by the trash cans, crumpled napkins, the faint smell of alcohol in the air. I knew Grant's yacht was moored somewhere here. I came closer and saw a man in a staff uniform. Young, about 25, with a tired look, as if after a hard night. "Hey, buddy." I took a bill out of my pocket and quietly handed it to him. "Did you work at the party yesterday?" The guy looked at the money, then at me, squinting. "Maybe. What do you want to know?" "I just want to know what happened after midnight. Who went where, who was with whom," and showed photos of Eliza and her friends. The waiter chuckled, licked his lips, and reluctantly took the money. "After midnight. Well, the girls, the ones with red hair, went to the VIP area. With men, I'll say right away that I didn't eavesdrop, but let's just say they clearly weren't discussing politics." I clenched my fists. My heart beat faster. "You are sure?" The guy chuckled. "Look, man, I'm just serving drinks. But I have eyes. I saw one of the guys tall, athletic. I think his name was Nick, leading your wife by the hand. And she didn't really resist." I felt something break inside me. I looked at the waiter and, gritting my teeth, asked, "What time did they leave the yacht?" The guy frowned, as if not understanding the question. "Gone. No one left the yacht," he shrugged. "They were here all night." I continued to pretend that I didn't know anything, that I believed it, that her explanations satisfied me. But everything was boiling inside. I needed more information. I wasn't going to act head-on. I wasn't going to accuse her until I was sure that I had evidence on my hands. I knew that I couldn't glow myself. If I start asking questions directly, rumors will quickly reach Eliza, so I decided to bring in someone I trusted. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Carter Reed, one of my old employees who worked in cybersecurity. Someone who could find anything if he had the right leads. I pressed the call. "Jack, I didn't expect a call from you on the weekend." His voice was sleepy, but interested. "What's happened?" I turned my gaze to the window. The city lived its normal life, and mine was bursting at the seams. "Carter, I need help." "Quiet. Nobody needs to know what I'm digging." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then I heard him exhale noisily. "What do you need?" "Video from Grant Williams' yacht where the party took place. Camera recordings, photos, any traces on the network, anything you can get your hands on." "Are you saying that you have access to their systems?" His voice became more collected. "No, but you have the resources to find out. I know that there were photographers there. I know that people post everything on social networks. I need to know how far she's gone. No guesswork, no emotions, just the facts." Carter fell silent again and then chuckled quietly. "I got you. Give me a couple of hours." There was a slight grin in Carter's voice. "But do you understand that I will have to work off karma for this later?" "I'll pay." I had no doubt. "Okay, give me time." I turned off the call and squeezed the phone in my hand. Now all I could do was wait. I went outside and took a deep breath of the morning air. Everything seemed too quiet. Cars drove by, someone was walking their dog, but I felt as if I was cut off from reality. I took out a cigarette and lit it, watching the smoke dissolve into the air. Time passed slowly. The days merged into one, and life in the house went on as usual. Nothing has changed, neither for the better nor for the worse. Everything looked the same as before. The usual breakfast ritual, routine kisses, conversations about nothing. Eliza remained the same as she had been in recent weeks, calm, relaxed. Or did she just play her role well? I watched her. Sometimes it seemed to me that she didn't even realize that something was wrong. She smiled lightly at me over morning coffee, touched my shoulder as she passed by, and asked how I was feeling. It would seem that the ideal wife, but I saw more than she wanted to show. Sometimes an elusive shadow of tension appeared in her gaze, barely noticeable, but I caught it. Small gestures that said more than words. The way she was a little late in answering when I casually asked about the party, how quickly she changed the subject if the conversation turned to that night. The only thing that made me at least somehow happy was that family life had long cooled down. I didn't have to make excuses for why I didn't want to go to bed with a lying, cheating bitch. I didn't have to hold back my disgust when she touched me. Not to mention the fact that after such fun nights, she could very well bring me a whole bunch of diseases. I didn't even know exactly how many lovers she had. One? Two? Was it just a drunken moment of weakness or a full-fledged affair? However, the answer was not that important. One thing is clear. If she betrayed her once, she will do it again. The only question was with whom. The friends kept coming. They appeared as if nothing had happened, laughing, chatting about work, new trends, restaurants. Their conversations were light and relaxed. They talked too much, too vividly like people who have something to hide. They acted relaxed, as if there was nothing suspicious about their last night. "Oh, Jack, what a pity you weren't at the party," Marissa said, taking a sip of her latte. "You should have seen this yacht. Pure paradise." I nodded, smiled, and pretended to be interested. "Yes, I can imagine." "Oh, really?" Tiffany interjected. "It was just great. You would definitely appreciate the atmosphere. This needs to be repeated. Maybe," I muttered, taking a sip of coffee. "The main thing is to have good company." Marissa grinned and exchanged glances with Eliza. I didn't miss this look. "Oh, the company was great," she said. "Fun, dancing, good drinks. Everything is as it should be." I listened silently, pretending to be interested. Marissa chatted about cocktails, music, and open-air dancing. They acted as if nothing important had happened. It's like they really just had a great night. I looked at Eliza. She also smiled, agreed, and inserted something into the conversation. But I caught how her fingers squeezed the handle of the mug a little tighter, how tensely she took a sip, as if giving herself a break. Microscopic tension, almost imperceptible. But I got it. "How are you, Eliza?" I deliberately casually leaned forward, leaning on my elbow. "Do you remember anything?" And then that day you said that you remember almost nothing. I watched as her smile became a little less sincere, as she tensed for a split second and then nodded. "Well, yes, of course. I was just tired then. But now I remember everything. Great party." Tiffany nodded. "We laughed so much. Really, Eliza, especially when Nick tried to show off his dancing skills." I noticed Eliza held her breath for a second. Then she let out a short laugh and rolled her eyes. "Oh yes, Nick and dancing are a special spectacle." I smiled. At lunch, I met Carter in a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. He was already waiting for me at the far table by the window, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee with a spoon. When I sat down opposite him, he looked up and nodded briefly. "What do you have?" I asked without unnecessary introductions. Carter twirled the cup in his hands, as if wondering where to start. Then he sighed quietly. "The party was closed, Jack. No photos, no online posts. They clearly care about privacy. But I found something else." I leaned closer. Carter pulled out his phone, scrolled through a few screens, and turned it towards me. The screen showed footage from the pier's surveillance cameras. The image is in black and white, grainy but clear enough to make out the figures. "The cameras near the water recorded who was the last to leave," Carter explained. "See for yourself." I looked at the screen and my heart beat faster. There, in the light of the lanterns, was Eliza, not alone. Nick walked next to her, his hand resting on her lower back. They moved slowly, deliberately, like people who have nowhere to rush. Nick said something. Eliza leaned closer. Her silhouette disappeared for a moment in his shadow. They then disappeared out of camera view. I put the phone away and clenched my fingers into a fist. Everything inside tightened. "So this morning she didn't go with her friends, she left with him," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Yes," Carter confirmed, "and she didn't just leave. They were clearly in no hurry to leave." I leaned back in my chair, gritting my teeth. Now I had no guesses, but facts. The question was different what to do about it. Carter, I need you to keep an eye on her, I said, looking up at him, as if in the role of a detective. Carter snorted, shook his head, and grinned. Do you seriously want me to play a private investigator? Jack, this isn't a movie. I'm serious, I answered firmly. I need facts, schedules, photo meetings, everything. No guesswork. He looked at me for another second, then chuckled and took a sip of coffee. Okay, it'll be fun. I always wanted to try myself in this role. I'll take care of it, but if it turns out you're paranoid for no reason, you owe me at least a bottle of whiskey. We agreed, I nodded, feeling a cold determination rising inside. Now I had a plan. 3 days have passed. 3 long days of waiting, during which I pretended that nothing was happening, that everything was going as usual. But inside I knew that the moment of truth was about to come. Carter called me this morning. I have what you need. His voice was dry, without a hint of irony. We'll meet at the same cafe in an hour. I arrived early, but Carter was already sitting at our usual table, his face serious and a cup of cold coffee in front of him. He didn't say hello, he just pushed the tablet towards me, looking straight into my eyes. I hope your nerves are strong, he said, because it's fucking tough. I picked up the tablet, my fingers trembling, but I forced myself to remain calm. The first few shots were normal. Eliza leaving the gym, talking to someone, getting into a car. Then the reason we met here began. In the pictures, she was with Nick. In the first one, he opens the door of his car for her, and she laughs and puts her hand on his shoulder. In the second, they are standing in some alley behind the building. Nick leans towards her face, and her hand lies on his chest. On the third, I felt my stomach tighten. In the third frame, they were kissing, not just in a friendly way. Passion, greed, all this was read in their poses. The next pictures were even worse. His hands were roaming over her body, her head was thrown back, and it was clear from the expression on her face that she was completely lost in this moment. I swallowed, trying to hold back the rising wave of disgust. My throat is dry. How did you get it? My voice sounded hoarse. Carter leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. Legal. Everything was filmed from surveillance cameras installed around the gym and nearby streets. The management of the complex has access to them, and I simply took advantage of the fact that I have connections. It's official, they provided the records because the system was recently in danger of being hacked, and I was helping them with security. So, if anything happens, we have an ironclad alibi. I continued scrolling. The next photo was of Nick and Eliza together again, but not near the gym. They stood outside his car, and from the way he held her waist and she tucked her hair behind her ear, it was clear that there was much more between them than just a drunk mistake. Then, the pictures got even worse. In one of them, Eliza laughs openly, throwing her head back, and Nick kisses her neck. In another, his hand slid under the hem of her dress. The next shot made me clench my teeth until they crunched. They were not hiding. They were not afraid of being caught. They didn't care. Carter cleared his throat, getting my attention. I thought I'd seen a lot, but damn, Jack, this is tough. Even for me. I turned my gaze back to the photographs. Now, these were not guesses, not suspicions. It was the truth captured on screen. What's next? Carter asked. I closed my eyes for a second and took a deep breath. Everything was burning inside. Now we play by my rules. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. In the darkness, the room seemed alien and cold. This house, once full of laughter and warmth, was now just a space in which we existed side by side, but not together. Previously, I would have turned around, hugged her in my sleep, and inhaled the scent of her skin. Now I couldn't even bring myself to touch her. I remembered how it all began. We ran into each other in a cafe late in the evening. I came for coffee, she came to kill time before the meeting. The line moved slowly, and without hesitation she spoke to me, as if we had known each other for a long time. Her voice was light, confident, she was saying something funny, and I caught myself not wanting the line to end. We left there together, continuing the conversation, which lasted about an hour. I listened to her, caught every word, and it seemed to me that at that moment the whole world had narrowed to her smile and the sparkles in her eyes. Back then I still believed that such meetings happen only once in a lifetime. Our first years were eventful. We worked like damn crazy, built our careers, but found time for each other. Spontaneous trips, late-night conversations in the kitchen, sex that was not just a mechanical act, but something living, greedy. She was the fire that burned inside me, and I thought that fire would never go out. But then something changed. Not right away. Slowly, unnoticed. Long conversations have disappeared. Sex became rare, and then even something formal. Her smile, previously so sincere, now seemed forced, as if she was mechanically playing the role of a wife, and I had become a convenient husband. For a long time, I convinced myself that this was just life, routine, growing up. That love transforms, that it is normal. But if this were so, why did this damn emptiness settle inside me? I turned my gaze to her silhouette next to me. She was sleeping with her back turned to me. Or was she pretending? Who is she now? I used to believe that love is a strong foundation on which everything else is built. Now I knew that love was just an idea that breaks into reality. I knew there was no need to wait any longer. Early in the morning, I sat down at the computer, leaned back in my chair, and took a deep breath. My head was empty, but my hands acted automatically. The first thing I did was go to online banking. No hesitation, not a single doubt. Within minutes, I had all of our joint accounts transferred to my name. Cash flows that were once ours were now entirely mine. Credit cards, savings, even fucking bonus miles, now it was all mine. She didn't deserve this. She didn't deserve anything. As soon as the transfers were confirmed, I moved on to the second point of the plan, called a lock replacement service. The person on the other end of the line clarified. Urgent, I answered in the affirmative. There wasn't even a question. New locks, new security code. The house now belongs only to me. No more traces of her presence. While I was waiting for the craftsman, I began to collect her things. Without haste, methodically. Suitcase, several boxes. I didn't know what things were important to her, and I didn't want to know. I just put everything that reminded me of her in my suitcases. Dresses, shoes, cosmetics, her favorite blue shirt, which I once gave her myself. All this now seemed alien, unnecessary. I wasn't angry. No, the anger has passed. All that remained was cold indifference. I didn't break the dishes, didn't tear up her photographs, didn't make a scene. He simply collected her life into boxes, like garbage that needed to be taken out. When the locks were replaced, I paid the locksmiths and went out onto the porch. I left my suitcase at the door. He took a mug of cooled coffee and sat down in a chair, looking into space. I didn't know when she would return. Today, tomorrow, in a week. However, this no longer mattered. The door was closed to her. She chose her path, now it did not include me. I didn't write to her, didn't call, I was just waiting. Let her see for herself how quickly what she considered hers is crumbling. Let him feel what it's like to be outside the door. It was strange. I thought it would hurt me. I thought that I would scream, get angry, and feel sorry. But no, I felt only a cold, icy emptiness. And in this emptiness, I finally understood I no longer feel anything for her. No love, no hate, only contempt. And this was the only right decision. Eliza. I drove up to the house in high spirits. The day went great. At lunchtime, I managed to find time to meet with Nick. These meetings always charged me with energy and filled me with excitement. I like to feel wanted, to experience again those emotions that had not been in my life for so long. My marriage to Jack was perfect on the outside, but stifling on the inside. 7 years of stability, predictability, comfort. A house that was always clean and cozy. My husband, who never raised his voice, always remembered what kind of coffee I liked in the morning. We lived like two halves of one mechanism, harmoniously, smoothly, and boring. Sex with Jack had long become a routine. The same movements, lack of passion, and most importantly, the lack of that same thrill that my friends talked about. They shared stories about their lovers, about the surge of adrenaline, about sex that was raw, vibrant, real, and I started to envying what I never had with my husband. For a long time, I convinced myself that cheating was immoral. But then I realized, why am I worse? Don't I deserve pleasure? Jack loved me, idolized me, and didn't even suspect that I could decide to do anything. And that's what made it all the more exciting. When Nick started paying attention to me at the gym, everything came together naturally. I wanted to try to see if I could feel the same excitement that my friends were talking about, and I felt it. From the very first meeting, I parked the car, took my bag, and headed to the door. Immediately, my gaze fell on several boxes and bags with things piled right on the porch. I frowned. What the? Jack usually didn't leave trash at the entrance. He always took the packages to the bin behind the house. I came closer and only now noticed that among the things were my clothes, my bags. There was an unpleasant pain in my chest. I reached for the door handle, but the door did not budge. Locked. I took out my phone and dialed Jack. Horns. 1 second. Third, he didn't pick up the phone. Only now, looking at the boxes, I noticed a white piece of paper stuck to one of them. My heart started beating faster. I stepped closer and read. "Get out of my life, bitch." For a second, I thought I had read the words wrong. It didn't fit into my head that this could be serious. Belatedly, panic seized me. What the hell is going on? My hands were shaking as I tried to call Jack again, but he still didn't pick up. The feeling of panic slowly gave way to anger. What the hell does he allow himself to do? Yes, he might have learned something, but to just throw me out of the house like trash. No explanation, no conversation. I took a deep breath and looked at my things. No, standing here like a fool is pointless. Something had to be done. The first thought is to go to Marissa or Tiffany. I could tell them they understood how these things worked. They will support. I got into the car, taking one last look at the closed door of the house. The very house that I considered my fortress suddenly became alien to me. I turned on the ignition and pulled out of the driveway, feeling a hot wave of resentment building in my chest. I dialed Tiffany. "Can you talk now?" My voice trembled, and this angered me even more. "Certainly. What's happened?" "Jack. He probably found out. About Nick. He kicked me out of the house." I practically shouted it into the phone. There was silence on the other end, then I heard a sigh. "Crap. Are you serious? He didn't even give you a chance to explain yourself." "No chance." I squeezed the steering wheel so hard that my fingers turned white. I just put my things out and locked the door. Didn't even answer the call. Can you believe it? "Listen, come to me. My husband is at work. We will discuss everything. I'll call Marissa. She'll come along too." "Thank you," I exhaled, pressing the gas pedal. The drive to Tiffany's house took about 20 minutes, but it felt like I was driving forever. Thoughts were spinning in my head. Jack was always calm, reasonable, and loyal. He idolized me and considered me an ideal wife. Even if he found out, couldn't he really talk to me? I expected scenes, tears, screams, maybe even threats. But not this. Not such a cold reaction that cuts me off from his life. I understood that I did the wrong thing. But did it really bother me? To be honest, not really. Yes, I was sorry to lose comfort, home, familiar life, but did I regret the act itself? No. I enjoyed every minute with Nick. It was exciting, and now I was not going to give it up. Parking at Tiffany's house, I took a deep breath and headed for the door. She was already waiting for me on the threshold with a glass of wine in her hand. "Baby, you just need a drink," she said, waving her hand, inviting me inside. "You're all red, as if you were thrown out into the street in just your nightie." "Very funny," I snorted, walking inside. "Did you call Marissa?" "Yes, she's coming. She said she would bring something special," in her style. I sat down on the sofa and took a glass from the coffee table. "I need alcohol now." "What should we do now?" I muttered. Tiffany chuckled, leaning back in her chair. "First of all, don't panic. What next? Let's think." Marissa arrived 5 minutes later. She entered the apartment, took off her jacket, and put a bottle of expensive cognac on the table. "Well, tell me," she said, filling the glasses. "Why the hell is your husband so freaked out? This is just funny." "That's what I'm talking about." I clasped my hands. "Just take me and throw me out of the house. No explanation, no chance to talk. Who does this? Men who suddenly find their manhood." Marissa grinned, handing me a glass. "But seriously, how did he know? Did you screw up?" I winced. "Don't know. Maybe someone told you. Maybe he saw something." "Anyway, he was rude." Tiffany interjected. "This is your home, too. You are married, you have rights." "Yes," I nodded, taking a sip of alcohol. Warm bitterness spread down my throat. "And I'm not going to just leave it like that." The evening with the girls was a great success. We drank almost the entire bottle of cognac that Marissa brought, laughed, joked, cursed Jack, and made plans on how I could get out of this ridiculous situation. Marissa insisted that I just needed to wait a moment to make him regret his actions. Tiffany said I had to show character and take control. I nodded, agreed, pretended to be completely confident in myself, but inside I had cats scratching. When Tiffany's husband returned home, I tried to look calm. He entered the living room, gave us a surprised look, and took off his jacket. "What kind of bachelorette party?" He chuckled, throwing the keys on the table. "Eliza has problems with Jack," Tiffany said with feigned ease. "If you don't mind, she will live with us for a while." He raised his eyebrows, looked at me, then at his wife. There was tension in the room, but after a second, he just shrugged. "What difference does it make to me? The main thing is that you don't make a mess here." He took a bottle of water from the refrigerator and went into the bedroom. I exhaled. For now, I had at least some kind of plan. This morning, I woke up with a slight hangover. My head was pounding, but I pulled myself together anyway, took a shower, and drank a double espresso. I had to go to work. At least something in my life had to remain stable. At 10 o'clock, my phone rang. "Eliza, a visitor is waiting for you at the reception," said the secretary's voice. I frowned. I wasn't expecting a client. Maybe Jack? My heart froze for a second. Maybe he decided to talk. Apologize? I went downstairs, trying to look confident, as if I was in control of the situation. But when she saw a man with an envelope in his hands, she felt her legs give way. "Oh no, not this. Not here, not now. Don't say this out loud, just hand over the documents and quietly leave." I mentally begged, but he had already opened his mouth, preparing to say the worst thing. I swallowed. Eyes scanned his face, hoping it was a mistake. But he looked straight at me, calmly, without emotion. "Eliza Crosby?" he asked in an even voice. I couldn't answer right away. "Why, yes." He handed me an envelope. "You have been served with a claim for divorce on the grounds of adultery." Time stood still. I wanted to scream, "Tear this damned envelope," but I just silently squeezed it in my hand. The man nodded and, without waiting for my reaction, turned around and left. I stood there, unable to move. Silence reigned all around. Colleagues passing by suddenly fell silent, fixing their gaze on me. A wave of shame washed over me. The face flushed. I was ready to disappear into thin air, to disappear. Everything that I hid so carefully has now become the property of everyone. Jack. I knew this would happen. I knew that she would not just leave, would not accept her defeat, would not apologize. Eliza never admitted mistakes. She will cling and try to get out. But this time, she didn't stand a chance. Divorce turned into war. I didn't leave her any room to maneuver. All her lying words, her actions, her betrayal, all this was now a weapon in my hands. I collected evidence and did everything according to the law. When I filed the lawsuit, I already knew that she would not just lose me, she would lose everything. She tried to fight, make me out to be a tyrant, the person who controlled her life. But each of her arguments was shattered by the facts. "Do you want to leave me with nothing?" Her voice trembled, but not from remorse, but from anger. I looked at her calmly, folding my arms over my chest. "You chose this path yourself, Eliza. I'm simply removing the consequences of your choice. This is unfair." She raised her voice. I've invested years in this marriage. I deserve part of the property, half of the bills. I have the right. I chuckled. Do you deserve it? I nodded slowly, suppressing disgust. Do you deserve it after sleeping with that coach? After lying to my face? You deserve exactly as much as you leave behind. And this is nothing. I saw her face twist with rage. She no longer tried to play the victim. Now in front of me stood a bitter, angry woman who could not accept the fact that she had lost. She tried to get everything she could out of me. She threatened to sue, demanded compensation, and tried to convince the judge that I owed her for the wasted years. But my lawyers already knew her every trick. Every document she signed, every expense she spent, every move she made over the past few years. You understand that my client has every right to financial support. Her lawyer was desperately trying to get something out. My lawyer, without blinking an eye, placed a folder with documents in front of the judge. Your Honor, here are bank statements for the last year. Payment for an elite gym, hotel, expensive gifts. All these transactions indicate her infidelity and the use of joint funds for personal gain. We are asking for a complete denial of alimony. The judge ran his eyes over the documents and sighed heavily. Considering the evidence presented, the court sees no grounds for satisfying the plaintiff's demands for financial support. The claim for division of property was also rejected. I heard Eliza take a sharp breath. She didn't expect things to turn out like this. She thought that she could get out of it, that she could get at least a part of what I had built. But now she stood before me empty-handed. I watched her and felt only one thing: disgust. Not a hint of regret in her eyes. Not a drop of remorse. Only anger that she was caught. Eliza. I continued dating, and soon I completely moved to live with Nick. Not because it was love, but because I needed someone to help me stay afloat. Jack knocked the ground out from under me. He didn't just divorce me, he methodically destroyed everything I had built. No job, no reputation, no stability. You can handle it, Marissa assured me, pouring champagne into glasses. You always manage. Well, yes, I grinned, raising the glass to my lips. Only this time I'm deeper than ever. After a scandal at work, I wasn't just fired. I was made persona non grata in my field. I sent dozens of resumes, went to several interviews, but heard the same thing everywhere. Sorry, but we can't hire you. Some said this with sympathy, others did not even try to hide their sarcasm. I knew Jack was behind it. He wanted me to feel his power, so that I understand that he can erase me if he wants. This is revenge, I whispered one evening, sitting on the balcony with a glass of wine. He's just taking revenge. Of course, he's taking revenge, Nick answered calmly, sipping his beer. And what are you going to do about it? I didn't know. I was angry, to the point of trembling, to the point of rage. But even in this rage, I had no regrets. Yes, I lost everything, but I would still choose myself again. He can't just break me like that, I said. Nick chuckled. Several weeks passed, but the situation only got worse. Nick worked, but his salary was only enough to pay for the apartment and some basic expenses. My savings were running out. My friends continued to say that I would definitely swim, but I saw their looks there was pity in them. Marissa invited me to parties less and less often, and listening to my whining was not so fun, and Tiffany was constantly busy, and if she agreed to meetings, it was no longer at her house. I began to understand that in their world, I was no longer an equal. Did you find anything? Nick asked one evening while we were sitting in the kitchen. I threw the phone on the table. There are refusals everywhere, even in small companies. Do you understand that he really destroyed my career? Come on, Nick leaned back in his chair. One person cannot block all your paths. Maybe if this person is Jack, I muttered through clenched teeth. He probably started rumors. He convinced the right people that I couldn't be hired. Now I am a mark. I saw Nick tense up. He was irritated by my obsession with this topic. He no longer wanted to listen to the endless conversations about Jack and how unfair life had treated me. I knew that his patience was not endless, but I could not do anything about it. Maybe it's worth changing the field, he suggested, shrugging his shoulders. Open something of your own. At least temporarily work in a different direction. Open something of your own? I laughed, but the laughter turned out hysterical. For what money? On yours? We can barely afford the apartment, Nick. He turned away, clenching his jaw. I knew he was tired. I'm tired too. Everything around me was falling apart, and I didn't know how to stop it. Jack. Life after the divorce turned out to be much more exciting than the last year with the cheater. The very first thing I did was regain what I had been missing lately, self-confidence. I took a week off and flew to Miami, a city of night lights, expensive cocktails, and women who knew what they wanted. I didn't need love. I didn't need affection. I wanted to feel freedom again, to wash away all the dirt of the last months. The first 2 days I just wandered along the coast, soaking in the atmosphere. In the morning, strong coffee, the sound of waves, sun rays breaking through palm trees. In the evening, a glass of whiskey, expensive restaurants, and conversations with beautiful, confident women. The first night was especially revealing. I sat at the bar with a panoramic view of the ocean, relaxingly swaying my glass. The stranger with red lipstick, whose eyes laughed when I told her about my work, leaned closer. We flirted, drank whiskey, and a couple of hours later we ended up in her room. "Do you want me to stay until the morning?" she asked, buttoning up her dress. I smiled, stretching out on the bed. "Only if you don't mind disappearing while I'm still sleeping." She laughed and left her number, but I never called. The next evening there was another woman, tall brunette with a warm voice. Then another one, a petite blonde who liked to talk about philosophy. I wasn't looking for anything more than these random encounters. Sex by mutual consent, with the understanding that nothing will happen after it. And it was wonderful. When the vacation came to an end, I realized I feel like myself again. No more pain, no more disgust. Just me and my life, free from lies. Upon returning to Austin, the first thing I decided to do was change housing. The old house was no longer mine. There were too many ghosts of the past memories of her, of our conversations, of lies that I had not noticed for so long. I didn't want to fall asleep in the bedroom where she lied to my face for years. I found a spacious loft in the city center. High windows, brick walls, minimalism in every detail. New stage, new house, new furniture, new life. And then I completely threw myself into work. The company demanded my attention, and now I had no more distractions. I spent 12, sometimes even 14 hours in the office, signing contracts, meeting with clients, and closing deals. "Jack, have you thought about slowing down a little?" asked my deputy Tom when I stayed in the office until midnight for the 10th time that week. I looked up at him and grinned. "Are you talking about rest? I just returned from the best holiday of my life." "Yes, but working for days at a time is not a vacation. Are you ever at home?" I shrugged. Tom shook his head, but didn't argue. I knew one thing. I would never let a woman ruin my life like that again. Now everything is under my control. Only I decide who to let into my life and under what conditions. Now everything is different. Now this is my world, and I make the rules in it myself. One evening, I found myself at a party with friends. It was a typical social gathering. Expensive suits, dim lighting, waiters with trays of champagne, and leisurely conversations about investments, real estate, and the latest city gossip. I wasn't particularly keen on being here, but my business partner invited me, and I decided a little social life wouldn't hurt. After all, this was an opportunity to make new acquaintances and perhaps close a deal or two. I was already thinking about leaving when I heard a familiar voice. I turned around and saw Nick. He clearly felt confident and spoke at ease with the guests. Remembering that he had once talked about working as a personal trainer for wealthy clients, I quickly understood how he ended up here. Apparently, he made connections with someone from the elite, or maybe his new companion had the necessary contacts. Now he looked as if he had always been part of this environment. I decided to stay longer. I was standing at the drinks table, pouring myself a whiskey, when I caught his figure in my peripheral vision. Nick is tall, athletic, dressed too casually for such an event, but clearly confident. His smile, relaxed posture, and slight disregard for the dress code immediately caught my eye. I turned my gaze to his companion, a young, striking brunette in a tight dress with a deep neckline. She laughed, leaning too close to him, her hand lazily sliding over his shoulder. "Jack," he nodded, approaching the table with drinks. "Long time no see." "Yeah," I took a sip of whiskey, not taking my eyes off him. "I didn't expect to see you here." Similarly, he grinned and nodded at his companion. "This is Lauren." The girl gave me a routine smile, but quickly lost interest and switched to talking with someone behind Nick's back. He didn't look particularly upset. On the contrary, he even seemed glad that her attention was not focused on him. "How is life?" he asked, taking a glass of cognac. I chuckled. "Better than ever. And you?" Nick shrugged. "Everything is fine. Work, training, life goes on." I couldn't help myself. "How is Eliza?" He looked down into his glass as if contemplating whether to answer. Then he snorted briefly. "We broke up." I raised my eyebrows. "Is it true?" "We were together just 3 months after your divorce," he said briefly, without going into details. I felt the corners of my lips lift themselves into a slight smile. "Well then," I raised my glass in a mocking gesture. "For a new beginning?" Nick nodded, knocking his glass with me. I turned around and left. "Eliza." I sat in the bathroom, clutching a pregnancy test in my hands, and couldn't believe my own eyes. Everything in my stomach squeezed into a tight knot, as if I had suddenly been plunged into ice water, and I didn't have time to breathe. 2 stripes. Damn 2 stripes. They looked at me like a mockery of fate, like a stupid mistake that could no longer be corrected with a slight snap of the fingers. My head was ringing, the hum was growing, as if someone had turned on a drill right in my temples. "It can't be," I mentally repeated, choking with panic. This is some kind of mistake. False positive result. Maybe the test is bad. Maybe I did something wrong." But even at that moment, I realized that I was deceiving myself. Over the last few weeks, I have had strange bouts of nausea, mood swings, and constant weakness. I chalked it up to stress, to the fact that my life was going downhill, to restless nights without sleep. And who in my place would have thought of checking for pregnancy when there is no job, no stable partner, no clear idea of the future? But now everything fell into place. I was pregnant. And this changed everything, although it seemed that circumstances could change much more when you are already hanging out at the bottom of your life. I looked in the mirror. The reflection showed me a woman with disheveled hair, reddened eyes, and a crazy look. I looked like I was 10 years older than I actually was. There was fear in the eyes, the cheeks were sunken, the skin seemed pale, almost transparent under the light of the lamp. I sighed loudly, feeling my heart pounding wildly in my chest, as if it wanted to jump out. I never thought I would be so scared about pregnancy. Once upon a time, at the beginning of my relationship with Jack, I imagined how we would be a happy family, how I would walk around with a rounded belly, and how he would touchingly take care of me. But this picture fell apart the moment I made that very mistake. I took the path that destroyed my marriage, my reputation, and my entire previous life. I leaned back, resting the back of my head on the cool tiled wall. The cold hit the back of my head like a pleasant, sobering wave. I wanted to close my eyes and sit like that for hours, cross out reality, exhale, forget. But I knew that in the next room a man was waiting for me, from whom I, in fact, was pregnant. And judging by how our relationship has developed recently, he will not be happy about this news. Nick, the same coach with whom I had a connection during my marriage to Jack. The one for whom I then, it seems, was ready to do a lot. But now that we live together, everything doesn't resemble a fairy tale at all. To be honest, this looks more like a dull friendship of convenience than a passionate relationship. I had almost no money left. I never found a job for this. I can thank both myself and Jack, who tried to cross out my name in the entire professional environment. Nick makes money, but he has absolutely no interest in taking responsibility for my life, and even more so for a child. What now? I thought, again turning my gaze to the 2 stripes. How will I tell him this? I didn't know what to answer myself. There was only one obvious thing left. The conversation could not be postponed. I'll just come out and tell it like it is. Let it be a shock, but the sooner I put a period or ellipsis, the better. I can't live with this secret, hide it, or invent some kind of plan. The truth will come out eventually anyway. Pregnancy is not something that can be swept under the rug. Soon the belly will begin to grow, the body will change. And mentally, I couldn't keep it to myself. My brain was already on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I stood up, threw the test in the trash, went to the sink, and turned on the water. I washed my face for an endless amount of time, looked at the thin stream, and tried to gain at least some confidence in the future. But instead of confidence, anxiety was seething in my chest, mixed with anger and resentment at myself, at life, at Jack, who was once my husband, and at Nick, who was now behind the wall and did not even know what blow he was about to take. Finally, I bit my lip, forced myself to leave the bathroom, and quietly walked into the living room. Nick was sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. His legs were casually thrown over the coffee table, and he radiated absolute calm and contentment with life. This contrast, he was relaxed, I was beyond hysterical, made the situation even more tense. There seemed to be an abyss between us. "We need to talk," I said. The voice trembled treacherously, and I immediately felt my shoulders squeezing, as if she herself was to blame for something terrible. About what? Nick didn't even look up, continuing to tap his fingers on the screen. I saw that he was checking social networks or chatting with friends, anything, but not me. "I'm pregnant," I exhaled, feeling my throat tighten. There are only 3 words, but there is so much in them. Fear, panic, hope, the desire to be heard. This moment dragged on. It seemed like seconds turned into hours. Nick blinked, looked up from his phone, and looked at me as if he'd heard some kind of ridiculous joke. I clearly saw an incredulous gleam flash in his eyes. He even raised his eyebrows, as if he wasn't sure if I was pranking him on purpose. "You're kidding, right?" He laughed briefly, but very strained. I just shook my head, clenching my hands into fists. She continued to stand, unable to move, like a statue left in the center of an empty stage. He stopped laughing. A tense grimace appeared on his face, a mixture of irritation and sudden realization. "Seriously." He slowly stood up and approached me. I nodded, trying not to cry. Although we had not been in an ideal relationship for a long time, there was a naive hope inside. Maybe he will say something supportive. Maybe he will have some kind words. Maybe he'll hug me, kiss me, and tell me that we can get through this together. But instead, Nick sighed heavily, lowered his head, and ran his hand through his hair as if he had just received the most unpleasant surprise of his life. Then he suddenly turned around, took out his wallet, took out several large bills, and threw them on the table in front of the sofa. "Then here," he said without turning around, "this is for the hospital. You know what to do." I froze. Everything inside felt cold, as if I had been hit in the face. A dull pain spread through my chest, and a lump rose in my throat. I should have guessed that this is exactly how he would react, but for some reason, even the cynical part of my inner voice did not expect such harshness. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't ask what I wanted, didn't offer to think about a solution together. No, he just chose the shortest route: money for an abortion, and, "Come on, goodbye." I swallowed, trying to control my rage. After all, damn it, this situation affected not only me, but also him. We both bear responsibility for this. But Nick seemed to studiously push away any idea that he would have to answer for anything other than his own selfish freedom. "Are you serious?" I whispered, slowly moving my gaze from the money to his face. "Do you think I'll just go and do everything without asking a single question? Without even trying to think of another option?" He looked at me as if I had asked something ridiculous, like, did he leave the house without pants? A strange irritation flashed in his eyes. "Lisa," he said my name in the tone one would speak to a small child who does not understand obvious things. "I'm not going to become a father. I have neither the desire nor plans to live with a family. You yourself know everything perfectly well. We've already talked about this 100 times when we first started dating. And let's not forget how it all started. You cheated on your husband. How do I know you're not going to jump to someone else at the first opportunity? I stood with my eyes closed and my lips pressed into a thin line. My throat began to tingle from pain and rage. He mentioned my sin, for which I had already paid in full. Maybe at some point in the past, Nick seemed like a way out of boredom, a way to prove something to myself and maybe annoy Jack. Now it had turned into a nightmare, and I didn't know how to get out of it. So, Nick continued, pointing to the money again, take it and decide. Or do you want to keep the child? For what? On my salary? With your savings, which are almost gone? This is nonsense, Lisa. You and I are in no position to raise children. There was indifference on his face, and there was an almost contemptuous tone in his voice. It was as if he was pushing me. Come on, go away. Disappear. And at that moment I realized that I would not stay here any longer. Even if I was ready to consider some options, now everything became obvious. No, this man will never be around, will never accept responsibility, will not help. He has already left me in a situation where I am absolutely at a loss. My hand reached out for the money, but I stopped, not wanting to humiliate myself even more. However, I mentally understood that I had no financial support. I have very little left in my pocket. Now I can't even afford to pay for a rented hotel room, much less expensive procedures. So you're just kicking me out, huh? I asked, with difficulty suppressing the hysterical notes in my voice. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing my tears. He shrugged his shoulders as easily as if I had asked. Should I bring you some tea or coffee? Okay, let's put it another way. We can barely tolerate each other these past weeks. I didn't plan anything serious with you, and you probably didn't either. So let's part ways on good terms. I'll pay for it, you'll do what you need to do, and we'll both get back to a life we're both happy with. Which suits us both. I wanted to scream. She definitely doesn't suit me. But apparently, this is normal for him. He will continue to go to the gym, look for rich clients, and go to parties. What about me? Where should I go? Images of the past flashed in my head. Here I am celebrating my birthday with friends, laughing, holding a glass of champagne. Here I am sitting in an expensive restaurant with Jack in love, convinced that everything in our lives will go like clockwork. Here I am a confident woman, getting a promotion and imagining herself almost the queen of the world. And all this collapsed overnight like a house of cards. Now I am a devastated, exhausted woman who, out of desperation, moved to live with her lover, and now stands and listens as he practically kicks her out, accompanied by cynical remarks. The most painful thing is that he is right about one thing. I destroyed my marriage, which means I myself started the process of this chaos. But he also took part in this. However, all the consequences fell on me. All. And now this is a pregnancy that I will have to terminate, because I do not have the right to give life to a child, if I am not even able to provide him with a normal future. I turned around abruptly, not wanting to continue this disgusting conversation, and headed to the bedroom. I heard his voice behind me. When you're done, let me know. I'll help you pack your things if necessary. From these words, something broke inside me, like a cold blow to the gut that makes you involuntarily gasp. Pack your things. He didn't even ask if I needed support after the procedure, if I needed recovery. Just throw me out the door, as if I were a worthless piece of furniture that was bought for some reason and now thrown away. The pain and humiliation overwhelmed me, and I could barely hold back my tears. Deep down in my soul, I understood. Everything in our relationship was heading towards this, but it seems that I didn't expect it so quickly and so cruelly. In the bedroom, I began to frantically look for something where I could put my things. The suitcase had been sitting in the corner for a long time unclosed, because I never took it completely apart when I moved in with Nick. I guess deep down I already suspected that I wouldn't stay here long. Our cohabitation was too fragile. But now the mere thought that it's all over makes me feel cold inside. I wanted to cry and scream, but I held on. She was angry at herself, at him, at fate. And at the same time I was feverishly thinking about what to do next. After all, one way or another, I will have to resolve the issue of pregnancy. And in this whole situation, there was one terrible irony. Once upon a time, I could imagine a happy pregnancy. I could see Jack next to me, caring, reliable, loving. But now it's all gone. I turned away from him for a ghostly hobby that rotted away in a couple of months. The next morning, I went to the clinic. Nick didn't even ask if I needed company. He was already getting ready for training and left before me, without even leaving me the opportunity to discuss the details. I signed up for the procedure myself. It seemed that I was moving in my sleep, like a robot. Everything happened automatically. I came, filled out the papers, and sat down for an examination. The doctor talked to me, asked about my condition, whether I understood what was ahead, and whether I had the support of loved ones. I nodded automatically, without going into details. I couldn't admit that I actually found myself in a situation where no one was behind me. I was given time to think, but what choice is there? I just sat in the waiting room and looked at the floor. People were walking around me, talking on the phone, muttering something about insurance premiums, prescribing procedures. It's like a normal office, no drama. And for me, this was the day when I finally gave up the last chance for some kind of family life, even if it's hypothetical, even if she and Nick would never have worked out. In the end, I signed everything. The procedure took place on the same day. They just had a free window. There was a feeling that I had done something irreparable, that I had completely ruined my life. I left the clinic, sat on the nearest bench at the entrance, and just stared into space. People were passing by, some were laughing, some were in a hurry, some were cursing on the phone. For all of them, my personal hell was invisible. I felt like a ghost, a pale shadow trying to figure out where to go next. I wanted to call someone, shout for help, so that someone would come, hug, and say, "Everything will be fine." But there was no one to call. My parents looked at me with condemnation for a long time, and my friends. After I was fired with a scandal, they gradually moved away. Marissa directly said that she did not want to get into my dark streak, and Tiffany was busy all the time and stopped inviting me to her place. And I was left without Jack, without friends, without work, and now without a child. For an hour or two, I sat there on the bench, in some kind of trance, until it got colder and a light rain began. When I realized that I was already completely chilled, I got up and slowly walked home. I returned to Nick's apartment, although the word home no longer fit this place. He was there in the living room, watching TV. Hearing that I entered, he glanced briefly and raised his eyebrows. "How did it go?" he asked casually. I didn't answer. I just walked past him, clutching a bag from the pharmacy that contained painkillers. Something inside me screamed, "Tell him how much it hurts you. Tell him how you feel." But I understood that it was useless. Nick doesn't care about anything except his own comfort. In the bedroom, I collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Gray shadows trembled on the walls. The thought flashed, but once upon a time I could imagine a completely different life. But that was all once upon a time. Now we need to decide what's next. Staying in Nick's apartment is humiliating, and he himself seems to want me to leave. Although he gave me some time, I saw his detachment and impatience. The next day, he actually confirmed my suspicions. In the morning, while I could barely move from weakness, he found me in the kitchen. "Eliza," he began, trying to speak in an even tone, "I think we should part. I don't want us to leave as enemies. You better leave. I can give you some money for the first time if you want." I looked at him. There was no sympathy in his eyes, only slight concern. It was obvious that he was uncomfortable with having to say that, but he was determined to put an end to it. And I understood. Staying here was simply delaying the inevitable. And why, if he is not my friend, not my partner, and certainly not my support? I just nodded, holding back tears with difficulty. "Yes," I whispered. "Give me a day or two to pack my things." He nodded. Then an awkward pause, we fell silent. I returned to the bedroom, where, right on the floor, I began to pack everything I had left into a suitcase. Some clothes, a few books, phone chargers. I didn't have much wealth. Everything valuable that I once had was gone. along with my place in society. At the same time, I was thinking where to go now. The only real salvation I had was my parents, who lived in another city where I grew up. My mother wrote to me a few months ago when she heard rumors about my dismissal and divorce. She asked if this was true, why everything was like this. But then I answered vaguely and didn't say anything specific. And with that, we broke off communication. But maybe now I can come to them, at least for a while. Yes, they will lecture, they will judge, because they always considered me the correct daughter, and I fell so ingloriously from the career heights. But now I have no other choice. There were simply no other options. When the suitcase was almost packed, I went to Nick to finalize everything. He sat on the couch, scrolling through the feed on his phone, and, as always, did not express a single drop of empathy. "I'll leave tomorrow," I said. "Don't worry, I won't stress you out anymore." "Okay," he nodded. "Call a taxi." It sounded like I had booked a hotel room and was just going on vacation. I wanted to throw something heavy at him to express everything that had accumulated, but I knew it was useless. A year ago, I would have been able to make a huge scandal, take out all my anger, and perhaps then I would have felt better for a couple of hours. But now I was squeezed like a lemon. I didn't even have the strength to be angry. So I just nodded and went back to the bedroom. She sat on the bed and looked at one point. "That's it," flashed through my head. A couple of minutes later, I heard him talking on the phone, calling a taxi for tomorrow morning. In the morning, the taxi arrived on time. I picked up my suitcase and left the apartment. Nick stood in the hallway with his arms crossed. He nodded farewell and said, "I hope everything will be fine with you. Good luck." It sounded so cold, so formal, that I just grinned. I couldn't answer "thank you" or "goodbye," and maybe I didn't want to. She simply closed the door behind her and headed towards the elevator. The taxi driver and I exchanged a couple of polite phrases. I called the bus station. There I planned to buy a ticket to my parents' city. I sat staring out the window all the way to the station. The morning was gray, the sky was overcast, and it was drizzling in places. The city also looked bleak, as if reflecting my inner state. The bus station is a dull place at any time of the year, but on this gray day she seemed especially sad. Gray walls, people sleepily wandering around with luggage, flight announcements that sounded monotonously from the speakers. The smell of cheap coffee and stale buns from the small kiosk at the entrance. I went to the ticket office and asked for one ticket. The cashier, a woman of about 50 with a tired face, looked at me, muttered, "We'll see now," and began typing something on the keyboard. A minute later, she gave me a ticket. I quickly checked the departure time. The bus leaves in half an hour. Sighing, I walked away, found a free bench, put my suitcase next to it, and sat down. When boarding was announced, I took my suitcase and went out onto the platform. She found the right bus and climbed inside, trying not to make eye contact with other passengers. She found her place by the window and put her suitcase on the top shelf. I sit pressed against the window. The bus started moving, the wheels screeched on the asphalt, and gray buildings flashed behind the glass. We circled around the city for a while, picking up the remaining passengers, and then drove onto the highway. The rain intensified and drops drummed on the windows. I watched how the windshield of the bus was periodically swept by a brush, and outside the window everything merged into one solid gray spot. It felt like I was leaving not only this city, but also my entire previous life, in which I had managed to make so many mistakes. Fields, rare buildings, and gas stations flashed past. I tried not to think about the past or the future, but it was almost impossible. I remembered the scene in court, how Jack stood confident, calm, and how I hated him at that moment for being so cold-blooded. I remembered how I told myself, "Nothing, I can handle it, I will find a job, I will still live the way I want." But these turned out to be empty words. I tried to imagine how things might turn out in my childhood city. Maybe I'll find a job in a small company run by some family contract. Or I'll get a job as an administrator in a cafe. After all, I have skills in communicating with people, although they're not the best right now. I may have to agree to any non-dusty job just to survive and save up to rent a separate room or apartment. After all, returning to your parents is a last resort. I'm sure we'll start quarreling quickly. They will never forgive me for breaking up my family and bankrupting myself morally and financially. Although, maybe if they found out what I went through. But I doubted that they would show much sympathy. My parents are people of the old school. For them, betrayal is almost a mortal sin. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.